Hello, everybody, and welcome to this special live stream by the Tourpreneur team in partnership with Airwallx. My name is Mitch Bach. I am one of the partners of Tourpreneur. If you don't know Tourpreneur, we are a global community of tour experience operators. There's about 14,000 of us scattered all around the world, from day tour operators, multi-day tour operators, DMCs, DMOs, you name it. And all of our members are constantly trying to figure out how the sort of global payments industry works, accepting credit cards, dealing with chargebacks, ACH payments, wire transfers. It's an incredibly complex network out there. And for the purposes of this conversation, I wanted to invite two friends, Josh and Max, both of whom work at Airwallx. And I invited them because they are far smarter than I am about this very topic. And the way this is going to work is we have viewers across our Facebook community, our LinkedIn event page, our YouTube channel. Some of you will be watching this later. And no matter where you are, you can add questions. You can connect during the event here or follow up afterwards with us, with the Tourpreneur community on Facebook, LinkedIn, anywhere else. And of course, reach out to the Airwallx team. The Airwallx team right here are probably about as smart and as helpful as anybody could be in the global payments industry. And it's because Airwallx seems to touch absolutely everybody. And so just to help lay the land a little bit, gentlemen, I know you're too humble to pull this up, but you seem to be processing billions of dollars of payments. Some of those millions might be our members, but it seems like you touch a lot of different sectors, a lot of different industries. But in terms of the travel industry, you work with everyone. You work with big payment processors, the large associations. It looks like you work with some of the media partners like Skift, and of course, most importantly, the global behemoth, much larger than Visa and JP Morgan combined, Tourpreneur. We are happy for you two to be partners of ours. And I want to just start by diving in. Of course, you all in the audience can add your questions to the conversation. And otherwise, I have canvassed our community members over the last couple of weeks. What are your pain points? What are your questions? What should I yell at these gentlemen about? And so I have got my own litany. All right. So Max, can we just get started with you? And can you give me the 1 second spiel of what exactly Airwallx is?
Yes, and hi everybody. Really excited to dive into this conversation with Mitch and you all. So Airwallx, you did a really nice job setting us up there. But Airwallx is a global financial infrastructure that allows tour operators and really any business to collect, hold, and spend in whatever currencies are relevant to the business today. And if looking at that slide you had up there, we've been around for about 10 years now. We have started our business in Australia and the APAC region, grew into Europe, and Josh and myself are actually part of our very fast growing team in North America here. To Mitch's point, we are partnered with a lot of folks and partners in the travel industry, Tourpreneur obviously being one of our favorites, along with USTOA, Skift, for anyone that might have been at the Global Forum last week. And our job is to really make your lives a lot easier and anybody's lives as it relates to spending in foreign currency and obviously collecting in any sort of global payments infrastructure today. So really excited to dig in here a bit further. And thank you, Mitch, for the intro.
So, Max, I know half of our audience just fell asleep when they heard the word infrastructure, because once we start talking about that, none of us feel like we understand it. Can I just ask you a follow-up and start by asking you, how should our members be thinking about you as different than Stripe, which accepts my credit cards, and Wise, which I'm using for my wire transfers, and PayPal, and some of those big well-known names? How do you fit into that landscape?
Absolutely. And I think the easiest place to start there is that we are a consolidation of all those tools you might be using as point solutions today, whether that is something like Stripe to accept payments, PayPal, maybe something like Wise on the payout side, right? This is an altogether solution, and it all really does center around our digital wallet, right? And I think the why behind this is we're allowing other tour operators to create these bank accounts and entities essentially in any regions that are relevant to your business today. So that is really where all of this starts and stops, as far as being able to collect, hold, and then spend all of that currency.
All right. So the answer is you do everything. Fantastic. We're going to dive into that. And I think that's why you're well positioned to kind of educate us on how this works. But before we sort of get into the nuances of the payments infrastructure out there, Josh, you are the frontline sales guy talking to tour operators and all of these people on the ground. Can I ask you what are the pain points that you keep hearing when you are talking to tour operators?
Yeah, definitely. And thanks for having me, Mitch. Very excited to be here. So the pain points, like, it's pretty simple when you break it down, right? I mean, you guys want to save on the cost of payments, or hey, we're paying out suppliers, or just accepting your payments from your travelers. Also, just making everything simple, right? We're dealing with global payments. It can get complex pretty fast. So like the nice thing about Airwallx is it just breaks down and makes everything so simple. I think the last thing also, like what Max touched on, where, you have a couple of these different payment providers, but you're logging in, you're trying to track everything, reconcile everything. Like within Airwallx, it's pretty easy. You just go in, and what you can do is you can even just collect your payments from travelers and pay out all through one platform. So it definitely like saves a lot of time on reconciliation also.
When you're working with partners, are you working with primarily multi-day tour operators, day tour operators? Like what kinds of entities?
Truly everything, and the reason is because there's different payment solutions make sense for different type of people. So let's say I'm working with a day tour operator, but they here in the US, but someone from Europe wants to come over and they want to pay in euros, right? Now the US place of business actually has a way to accept and hold the euros without having to pay high fees. Even let's say you have like a US tour operator who's doing a multi-day tours in Europe and throughout Southeast Asia. What they can do is they can actually use the Airwallx platform to then conduct the payments in whatever local currency it is. So I think that's the great thing about our platform, is that you can make it however, design it to specifically to however you want to run your business.
Max, one last intro question. One of the fairly regular questions or comments we see from our operators around the globe is they've been rejected by a payments platform. Why are tour operators so annoying to the payments industry, or why are they getting rejected? Sometimes they're on a list along with they're on a list with like weapons contractors. It's like, what can you help me understand a little bit of like what from a payments industry point of view they see in travel?
Yeah, and that's an interesting analogy. That's certainly not how I think of anybody in this conversation, weapons manufacturers. But I think the reality, Mitch, is that when it comes to just the nature of payments in travel, there's a lot of cash flow both in and out, right? In terms of how the business works, and certain reservations with um, the other suppliers in the industry. So I think that's a lot of the time, we can be very honest here, right? A lot of these other companies are very dollars and cents driven. And when they see a company that might not be in the green 24/7, or just flush with cash, they get a little skittish, right? So it's certainly something that we understand, and that we're very, honestly excited to see and work with when it comes to our operators. Just again, going back to all the pains that they're accustomed to when dealing with a lot of these traditional providers today.
Yeah, I think especially during COVID, there was a house cleaning of some of these companies that through no fault of their own saw a lot of refunds, a lot of transactions being reversed, and realizing that it was a precarious and a risky business. So I'm glad to see that partners are back and interested in travel and interested in supporting operators. Now let's get to the part of the party where we try to decipher the payments industry. And Josh, you shared a slide that I kind of fell in love with. And I know you all tried to talk me out of sharing it because it is complex, but I love it because I like a flow chart. And I was wondering if you could just help me kind of understand these different levels of what's going on in the global payments industry here.
Yeah, definitely love to dive into this. So again, like we're going to see a lot of different boxes on this chart. Don't be overwhelmed. We're going to break it down, make it super simple. And I think just like the easiest way to think about it is, okay, what's my goal? My goal is to collect money from travelers and pay out suppliers. So when we're looking at accept payments, there's different types of payment behaviors in different regions. For instance, if you're in Australia, you might use a lot more bank transfer to collect funds, where if you're here in the US, you're probably going to see a lot more cards. So what Airwallx does, it actually gives you the option on however your customers want to pay you, you can accept. Because at the end of the day, if you're accepting your funds from your customers, make that process easy. It's going to be a lot easier on you. So that's how you can accept through any type of cards. We even have alternative payment methods. For instance, I don't know if you guys have ever checked out using Apple Pay. Makes everything a lot more easier. So you can just do that real quick. Or even let's just say, hey, I want to go ahead and just even accept through bank transfer. You can do that within like a local bank transfer, or even if you wanted to accept through Swift for a certain reason, you can do that as well. And I think like the key thing here is like once you accept those funds, they get held in your multi-currency account wallet. So let's say you have travelers or customers from different types of destinations where maybe they're paying you euros, they're paying you USD, they're paying you Canadian dollars. What you can do is actually hold it within the multi-currency wallet instead of having to force the FX conversion back to your local currency, because we all know that's going to eat up a lot of margin. It is like a secret margin killer within this business. So we definitely want to protect your margins on this. And then spending the funds, we make it easy. So what you can do is you can do the Airwallx borderless cards. Now, these are no international fee cards. Go ahead, whip it up. It's a Visa card. You can be like physical or virtual. Use that to pay out your providers. You can even get some cash back as well. Or let's just say, hey, my supplier only does bank transfer. You can actually make a transfer using local rails within the Airwallx system. And now, like, what's local rails, right? So when you make an international payment, you're probably doing it through what's called like a Swift. Now, this was made, I believe, in the 70s. It's a little bit clunky, but with like local payment rails, it's actually done through our local partner bank. So for instance, if you're here in the US, you can just pay out using ACH. Or if you're paying out a supplier in Europe, you can actually just utilize the SEPA system. So not only is it a lot quicker and more efficient, so your supplier's happy when that they get paid faster, it's also a lot cheaper on your end to conduct the payment. So I know I just kind of speed ran it really fast. We'll dive into more of this, but go ahead and I'll kick it back to Mitch.
Yep. Unfortunately, you hit all of the letters that I need to help our community understand and myself. Let's start, but I love this concept, right? So the idea is essentially that you want the customer's experience to be as easy as possible. I think that's a golden rule for tour operators in general. Sometimes there's a tendency to want, I get it, to want to make your life as the business as easy as possible. So like, this is the way I accept payments, but it seems like you're saying it's really important to actually meet the customer where they're at, the way they want to pay. And so don't force them into a box. I know this as an American, we are disgustingly different than the rest of the world with the ways we like to pay. For example, we hate wire transfers. We don't use WhatsApp. You know, annoyingly, 350 million people are like a little different than a lot of the rest of the world. And so this wire transfer thing is always a bit of a bee in my bonnet, because I do know as an operator myself that ACH payments are a lot easier to do usually. Like they seem to not require all these logins and these typing in of this complex details. Can you give me the rundown of like why ACH is a uniquely American thing and very different than a wire transfer?
Yeah, definitely. I can touch on that. So like the ACH is basically just like the easy way to make transfers here in the US from bank to bank, right? So when you're making a wire transfer, that's even just like, let's say global over to someone in Europe, like it becomes very complex just because you have a couple different like banking systems talking to each other. Where here in the US, if you're just doing ACH, it's pretty simple. And then you can just utilize what's called like a local payment rail. And think of it just like, I like to think of it as even just like, hey, your money's on a train and it's just on the payment rail to get to its destination. So the good thing like here in the US is like, hey, if you're using ACH, It's just a local, it's done very quick and it's efficient because everything's in the same ecosystem. But I think also to kind of branch from the question a little bit, like we are able to access the same train tracks without having to actually go to the specific country, open up the entity and conduct business there. Like you're actually able to use like the ACH equivalent in Europe, which is the SEPA system, just as if you're sending the ACH here. So what you're able to do is just kind of make like local bank transfers a lot easier, to kind of break it down a little bit.
Okay, that's really appealing. So SEPA is similar to ACH, but it's the European version.
Mm-hmm. Yep, exactly.
Max, talk to me about APAC, Australia, and you had mentioned earlier that there's different sort of customer payment behaviors associated with different regions. Can you break down some of those different behaviors? I think it's really important because our community is often, I'm an Australian operator and I sell Americans trips to Europe. And so what does that look like just globally, just in terms of the highest level behavioral differences?
Yeah, I certainly happy to touch on that a little bit. I think when it comes to APAC specifically, they are, and Josh sort of touched on this a little bit, much more amenable and alternate payment method friendly, right? Other than just using cards. There's a lot of specific tools and apps that they use over there. So I think that's a big part of it, and that can make things pretty complex as well when it comes to different systems speaking to one another.
Josh, if I'm an American and I'm trying to, no, I'm a European, sorry, and I'm trying to sell my trip to an American audience. Are you saying that like Airwallx is able to basically connect the rails of these different easy local systems and make it essentially fake local for everyone? So we're not dealing with the awkwardness of these different geographical kind of like structures.
Exactly. And the thing like
Wow.
how Airwallx works is like you'll have what's called like your wallet, right? And think of this just like as your account. And within that account, you can hold these different types of currencies. So for instance, if you're a European tour operator, what you're actually able to do is hold USD. So how you're able to do that is you create what's called a global account. So what this is, it's an account within Airwallx. You can literally set it up in 2 clicks and it walks and talks just like a US bank account. So when your client in the US is like, hey, I want to pay you through bank transfer, instead of having them to like pay a hefty FX fee or just even have like a bad experience trying to pay you, what you're able to do is provide them banking information so they can just make an easy ACH, which again is that local payment rail here in the US, to your Airwallx account. And essentially to them, it's great because they're familiar with, hey, this is what my ACH number is, or these are my banking route number. So what you're able to do is actually meet your client at a client level. So it makes them comfortable to send the funds, and it also makes it really easy for you to accept those funds, because once you accept them, you're just holding them in your Airwallx account in USD, and from there you can use it to pay suppliers, you can transfer it back to yourself, whatever you want to do is able from there.
That's very sexy. So I mean that's I mean that's really appealing in this kind of like world of complexity where you lose so much between those transfers. And a lot of our members often ask about foreign transaction fees in particular. And we had somebody this morning bring up the fact that they were trying to accept they accept their payments in euros, and then they had to pay a vendor out in a local currency, and they got hit with a shocking fee that they had no idea was coming. Who's charging these fees? Like, what greedy jerk in the middle somewhere is suddenly making this really expensive for our operators?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so that would be the banks, right? It would be the types of banks, or if they're using a different type of payment method, like that's what it is. And I think like the thing that we do very well is we're extremely transparent. Like you're paying a fee to use a product when the product's essentially, hey, we want to move money. Like you shouldn't have to be guessing as a tour operator, because there's multiple reasons. One, you could be hit with like a larger fee than you anticipated, and that's going to eat into your margins. So I think like that's the whole aspect of, okay, some of these types of banks, they just kind of like, prey out the little guy, and you're going to get charged a lot of FX and you aren't even aware of it. I think something we do in the system is like, hey, this is what's called an interbank rate. So that's just a fancy name for, since we have these banking partnerships, this is what we can give you as, let's say, a USD to euro. And there's just a simple FX markup. So it's completely transparent. Even when you're about to send the funds, you can see, okay, this is how much it's going to cost. So I think that's like the very even, just dive into a more even sexier part of the platform is, hey, everything's transparent right there for you. So when you're doing your reconciliation, your cost analysis, you can know exactly all your trip level financials.
Listen, let's make payments sexy again.
Let's make payments sexy again. It's our new tattoo.
Listen, it's an expensive rebrand I just did for you. So Max, in terms of, so we've got the ACH and wire transfer and SEPA and all these rails being connected together. I love that idea. But then there's this other kind of world, and I'll bring back that slide of what you call, I don't know what you call it. You call it alternative methods. There we go. Like Zelle, PayPal, Apple Pay, Google Pay, whatever that might be. How should we be thinking of that in similar terms as like ACH and wire transfers? Like, what if I want to be able to offer Apple Pay to my customer in their home environment where that's really easy for them? Like, what layer is that?
Yeah. I think, and going back to the why a little bit, right? Like this is a, I don't think we've said it explicitly, but this is a competitive industry, right? So I think being able to offer payment methods and things that are more relevant to your customers, that makes their lives easier, right? I know we keep going back to that point. That's the goal here. So that piece is on the acceptance side, but it's something that we actually refer to payment acceptance, where it's more on the credit card and just processing side in general, where we're able to insert payment links, send them directly to customers, and they from there, like you said, Mitch, they're able to just use either a credit card or other payment methods that are familiar and easier to them. So there's the kind of banking side of this, of course, and then we're also looking at the processing and merchant side is what we call it here.
Yeah, so there's these two sides. On one side, you're making it easier for the customer, and on the other side, how is it you're being able to provide efficiencies in the fees, in the costs of doing these things? Like, why is it interesting for you to for JP Morgan to work with you and be like, listen, we're just actually going to make it cheaper for people to use you? Can you help me understand how you're making all of this cheaper for an operator? Because like you're hitting on the right pain points. Every operator basically wants to pay less and wants it easier for their customer. How does that work?
I think the question around JP Morgan is interesting. I think it's just with our reach and the partnerships that we've built. I think that's what's appealing about working with Airwallx. And at the end of the day, we're providing a very easy to use, great service that's cost effective, right? But at the end of the day, still a healthy business for us to run. So I know we've sort of tabooed the word right at the start, but it goes back to the infrastructure that we've built and the partnerships that we've created both on the banking side and on the merchant side, right? Making this both appealing to investors, to customers, to the actual suppliers themselves, as well as Airwallx.
Well, I like the train track. I like the train track metaphor because that's infrastructure, and you're making the rails fit nicely together, despite them being built by Germans and Americans and Thai people, whatever. So I like that. We're making infrastructure sexy. So, Josh, I'm just wondering, as you are working with all these different kinds of operators, are you finding best practices in terms of things like how much do they ask for deposits, and are they doing installment payments? Because I'll tell you, sometimes I'll go to a tour operator's website and it'll be a $12,000 trip, which isn't outrageous actually. And their booking button will be like, pay me $12,000. And that's a hard ask. And so I'm wondering, I know this isn't exactly like, as the rail engineer, your purview, but I'm just wondering if you're seeing things out there around the best practices of how operators are asking for different kinds of amounts and installments and payment plans and things like that.
Yeah, definitely. And it's kind of funny where it's kind of like no two trip is the same. Like no tour operator really runs the same, but I do see a couple common like best practices, right? And I think it really all stems down to how you're going to be able to organize your business to make sure that you can clearly see all the funds that are flowing in and out to make sure that all payments are being made at the right time. So one common thing that I see a lot of times is when it comes to like installments, what they'll do is they'll either tell the clients like, hey, put like whatever X amount down and then X amount 30 days before, and then pay the rest like right when you're about to go on the trip. And what they really use this for is they utilize like our payment links feature if they're in a card heavy geographic area like the US. So it's very simple. What you would do on your end is you just go, okay, I know they're 30 days from now. So what I'll do is I'll create a payment link, send it over to them, and all they have to do is just fill out their financials in terms of, hey, let me put in the credit card. Super easy. And then from there, you then accept the funds. So let's kind of go through a scenario. Hey, I accept the funds in USD, but Max is going on a trip in Europe and he's paying me in USD. What I can do right there is I can actually go into Airwallx platform, convert it to euros, and have it sit in my euro account until it's time to actually pay out my European, whether it's like a DMC, hotel, any type of supplier. So you don't have to worry about like the currencies changing so much in terms of like the value. So you kind of just hold the euros. So you don't have to worry about any of that. You have a triple of financials all ready to go, and you can conduct the payments.
A question about credit cards in particular. Given our members are all around the world, they're accepting credit cards, and oftentimes they're looking for the cheapest credit card processor, and they'll get answers from our global community that are like this. Oh, my processor charges me 2.9%. In America, we know that rate very well.
Yeah.
Oh, mine in France is only 0.6%. Why are we seeing, and I don't know who can answer this better, but why are we seeing these different kinds of credit card rates all around the world? And is there anything we can do? Are we stuck where we are geographically?
Yeah, definitely. And like, to be transparent, a lot of it has to break down to geography, right? Just like the actual cost it takes to accept a credit card in the US, it's going to be higher than it is throughout Europe. And that's just basically just because how credit card, I know we don't want to use this word, infrastructure is just set up over to just accept a card in general. It's just going to end up costing more in the US versus if you're international, because that's just how the banking system works. It's very interesting. I mean, it's another reason why, hey, in the US, card are able to offer you a lot higher cash back because essentially they're making more on that fee. So I think it's like, okay, so we want the cheaper rate. What are some ways we can do that? And given the global nature of the business here, I think the way to save on FX, so I'm not sure if some people are doing this now, but let's say you're a US provider and you're actually accepting, let's say, even Canadian dollars, just a little bit north of the border here in New York. What happens is when you accept those Canadian dollars, you actually get forced back into USD, and that's about like 1 to 3%. So that's a significant amount of the margin for just the FX fee. So what we do here at Airwallx is, hey, you can open up that Canadian global account like I mentioned before, and now what you can do is there's no forced conversion, so you don't have to hold the funds and force the funds back to USD and have the extra cost. You can just hold the funds in Canadian dollar and make it a lot cheaper for yourself. So that's like one cost-saving strategy I recommend to a lot of my clients.
So it's almost as if they're keeping virtual bank accounts kind of all around the world, and you're like, not almost, it is. But is it's a situation where they're not going through this protocol of having to open up these actual accounts in these countries and things like that. You're doing the heavy lifting for them. Is that right?
Exactly, right. And so what we're able to do is just like, even just think about it as like a physical wallet, right? And I'm gonna go on just a long global trip where I'm gonna go to Canada, I'm gonna go in Southeast Asia, Australia, where as if you're just to hold all the bills in your wallet. Within Airwallx, like it's a platform where you can actually hold all those different types of currencies in your business wallet, if that kind of helps explain it a little bit further.
So Max, when we started conversing with you, I wanted to learn more about Airwallx, and the more I learned, the more I was like, oh my gosh, this is so uniquely helpful to tour operators. And I said, but like, the idea isn't that we're building a sales pitch here. The idea is that we're helping tour operators. So I want to hear from a real tour operator. And you mentioned authentic vacations, and there's a quote from Simon Russell that I'm going to quote. I just got this in my inbox. Simon says, "Never underestimate the complexity and cost of paying suppliers by card in currencies other than your home country's currency. You need a solution like Airwallx," and then you blow smoke. But I'm wondering if you could use Simon's company, Authentic Vacations, as like a real, I guess, case study to talk through a real operator's variety of challenges and then the way that sort of like you would work with them.
Yeah, this is one of our favorites here. Simon is a great partner steering the ship over there. So Authentic Vacations, they're a tour operator based in Arizona. They started their journey just catering to Ireland, and have since grown into a company that offers really global destinations. And that's, I think, another, not to put the hard sell on here, but value prop of ours, right, is to help companies like Authentic Vacations grow their presence, right? Make that really easy, remove the borders that often exist when doing that. But for them specifically, they had a lot of disparate solutions and methods that were making things difficult. How they were doing payments to suppliers that accepted cards was leading to a lot on the foreign transaction side and a lot of cost, right? Josh mentioned those hidden margins before. That was definitely something that was eating into theirs. So what we were able to provide was our virtual card solution to them, give them an opportunity to use something in that currency while also earning a little bit of a rebate in rev share, right? So not only removing the cost, but giving them something to, sweeten the pot a little bit in terms of using our cards. And they were also working with a lot of foreign banking partners as well. So we go back to those examples, Mitch, that you mentioned around being hit with wire fees, FX fees that they weren't necessarily understanding. It was difficult, right, in terms of visibility, protecting margins, and really just working with a couple of disparate partners, making reconciliation and the accounting department's life very difficult. So bundling that all together, using Airwallx, right, on the card side, on the banking transfer side, as well as leveraging our connections. I believe they use NetSuite. So we also have a host of accounting tool integrations that make accounting departments' lives a lot easier, has really yielded, like you heard from Simon, a really healthy partnership and a lot of operational efficiencies for them.
I love that. I want to dive in for a minute to some of these efficiencies. One of the pain points that especially multi-day and larger operators start to have is credit card chargebacks. I'm wondering if you could just take a moment, one of you, and explain a little bit about how a chargeback works. And I'm most interested in hearing who is the ultimate arbiter of whether you were right as the operator or the customer, and why do tour operators usually lose despite being right? Josh.
Definitely. So I can go into chargebacks because a lot of times, it is often, but honestly, like something we found in the industry itself is that you don't see a lot of chargebacks in the tour operator, right? And kind of bring it back to what we first talked about in travel, which was, hey, like this is kind of like on the strict, I think you even mentioned like a weapons list. And the reason is because with a lot of the common like large tour operators, you do see a lot of chargebacks, but we understand like at Airwallx, like a lot of tour operators, you don't see a ton of chargebacks. Now they do happen. And now the thing is like, we do have a certain chargeback process. And I think what really separates us from a different type of company is when there is a chargeback, what you can do is contact our support, right? So let's say if someone listening is interested in Airwallx, they're on board with either Max or myself. And then within that, they eventually meet one of our account managers. So I think the important thing is like, hey, chargebacks are going to happen in the business. But within Airwallx, you're going to have an actual person to reach out to, and you're going to get a response within like a very, very short time frame, instead of sometimes like, hey, I have a chargeback and I'm like searching, I'm contacting like a bunch of different like random support emails. So I think that's like the big difference is, hey, you're going to go ahead and actually get an actual person to work through the chargeback together. And we're going to actually take the time and listen to the tour operator's case of why a person decided to file a chargeback. So it's really just kind of like taking the time and understanding the situation from there. From there, we have the simple protocol that we will deploy based off the certain situation.
Interesting. So you actually act as sort of like a facilitator of the I guess resolution of that dispute.
Yep, exactly.
Interesting. Very cool. Let's go back and let's kind of finish off with this other side of the equation, which is on the right of this chart. If you can't see it, it says spend funds and make payouts. So far we've really been focused on that kind of customer ease side of things, making sure that you meet the customer where they're at. I think that's a really great golden rule. Whether they want to pay by Google Pay or credit card or ACH or bills of hay, you should allow that and then create the sort of rail tracks to get to your bank accounts. I think another takeaway I've had so far is hold that money in the local currency. Don't just keep making all of these conversions sometimes for no reason, because you might end up using that money later in your business in euros to pay a vendor or to pay somebody out. And so like don't change it over to US dollars or whatever it might be and then change it back over to euros each time, because you're losing money every time. Am I kind of right to see it that way?
Yeah, definitely. I think the thing is like, hey, if I'm going to accept the funds, might as well hold them within the currency until it's time to actually transact. Because the reason being is like, hey, if you're going to do an FX conversion, it's going to cost you money. Like what we give you the option to do is like make that FX conversion whenever it's going to make sense for yourself. So whether it's like, hey, I want to hold a Canadian dollar because I actually have a trip coming up in 6 months where I'm designing a new thing, I'm going to have to pay out a bunch of Canadian suppliers. You can actually just hold it until it's like, hey, it's time to conduct the payment. So you don't have to do that forced conversion, right? And that's really what eats up a lot of margin within the tour operator businesses.
Also, there's like a certain, I don't know, game you can play where, oh, the exchange rate is really good right now. So cash out my proceeds at this moment. Can I likewise fund that account when the euro is really, really strong or really, really weak or whatever it might be, and kind of like make those transfers in the other direction that's not specifically linked to a payment?
Yeah, definitely. So within the wallet itself, right, you can either send the funds and transact into whatever that FX, that foreign transaction at that time. But let's just say, hey, I have a ton of USD. I know I want to be holding more euros just because of certain type of like environment factors. It's something I want to do. We even just have a conversion tab within Airwallx. And again, the key thing here is the transparency. So when you go ahead to the conversion tab, you're going to click on a little click down. It's going to show you exactly what it's going to cost to transact the USD to euros. Just do it right on the system. And then within a matter of seconds, go ahead. And now you'll actually be able to hold euros and spend at your leisure.
Love it. So let's get to this final kind of bucket of trouble, which is I'm trying to pay my restaurant in Florence. I'm trying to pay my guide who is Swiss and leading a tour for me in France and Italy. And I'm trying to also make sure that, like, I don't know, I'm not shipping credit cards all around the world. That's just my company card and they just start spending or whatever. And it's hard for me to track it per trip. I don't know. I'm thinking of actually the way that I've run trips for years, and it's like a nightmare. It's basically I hand over a CSV file to my accountant and say, figure it out, because this was annoying. But I do see a lot of like Chase transaction fees on that statement, and I just close my eyes and say it's the cost of doing business. So I'm wondering if you could introduce me to the wonderful world of thinking about virtual cards, which are linked to these kind of virtual bank accounts you have all over the world.
I'm happy to take that one, Mitch. And I'm sorry to your accountant. I'm sure they're not on this call, but I'm sorry Mitch was doing that to you.
He only listens to me when I'm paying him, so I'm sure he's not on this call.
That sounds good. So I think there's a lot of pros with the virtual card. I mean, I mentioned I was at Skiff Global Forum last week, and I think it was Mastercard's president was really talking about the rise of fraud, right, in the industry and how that's such a focus right now. So I think that's a big focus for us as well. Making tour guides' lives very easy while they're on these trips, right? Giving them what we're able to do is make these either single use cards. You can set any sort of limits that might pertain to specific trips, so there's no overspending. That's a huge part of this as well as on the reconciliation side, right? The ability to tie a specific card to a specific trip can be very powerful, especially when things like cancellations happen, right? And you're able to tie that back to which actual card and payment that was related to. So I think the other part of our cards as well, and this is both on. We do have physical cards. I know we're talking about the virtual here. Is we call them borderless cards. Huge kind of pro there is that we do not charge any sort of foreign transaction fees. These cards actually pull directly from that multi-currency wallet that we continue to talk about. So when we think about just being cost effective, as well as getting in front of fraud and all that good stuff, right? I think our cards, virtual and physical, are very useful.
So could I load a card with just the amount needed for a guide to have for a specific trip? Could it be like a certain amount of euros, a certain amount of, I don't know, Turkish lira, whatever it might be in a multi-currency trip, and then that guide has only access to those earmarked funds for the trip, and I can sort of take it away from them at the end of the day? Am I right in imagining this scenario?
Nailed it.
Yay. I have a question about what that money's doing when it's in those virtual bank accounts. Can I earn any interest? Can I do anything along those lines with it? It's a question from the audience. It's not my
Yes.
not my dollar sign eyes.
Great question. So it's coming. If you're one of our customers in Australia, not sure if you guys have been on the amazing Facebook group, but we have a lot of people like, hey, we really love what's called our yield product. So when your funds are actually just sitting in the account, you're actually earning yield off that. So it almost becomes like revenue generating for your business to actually hold the funds in your account. Now, depending on your region, it's on the roadmap. Hopefully it's coming here in the US very, very shortly. So we'll definitely post on my LinkedIn, let everyone know in the group when yield's coming here in the US. But if you are one of our customers in Australia, you can actually go ahead and earn yield on your funds currently right now.
I love that. So I think we've tackled both sides pretty nicely and answered a litany of questions that our audience has had. I'm trying to keep this to our specified 45 minutes for the webinar. And in the last couple of minutes, Max, what are some of the takeaways for what a member of our community should be thinking about in terms of doing, I guess, an audit of how their payment flow looks? What should they be looking at in order to make more efficient, to make cheaper, to make better?
Yeah, I think first and foremost, right, how many point solutions are you using in your payments flow today? That feels like the easiest one, right? And it's not rare to hear a lot of the tour operators we're working with today say 3, 4, 5, even when it comes to I'm working with a separate bank, I'm working with someone separate on the merchant, the payment acceptance side, as well as someone on the FX and payable side, right? So, and even more than that. So I think that's first and foremost. Can you afford to consolidate what you're doing today? I think, Josh mentioned something, and it might sound crazy, but cost transparency is not the strongest, I think, in the payments industry. So find out what you're paying today, right? Whether that be on the FX side, on the acceptance side, the wire side for your bank. I think that's it could be a complex exercise depending on who you're working with, but really understanding what you're paying, and then talk to accounting, right? Talk to those folks that Mitch is just handing a CSV file and saying, do some work with this. How much time is it taking them at the end of the day to do reconciliation? How much time are they investing in these projects and just, mundane tasks that they could be investing somewhere else to help grow the business? I think it's those three for me, right? Can you afford to consolidate? What is the cost of doing business today across that stack? And what does this all look like on the back office side?
I think my accountant's watching this and he's like, "Oh crap,
You just logged on.
Mitch is gonna fire me. I just lost my job." No, absolutely not. Yes, we love you. Josh, I'll give you the final word just to wrap up. Any sort of like takeaways, any thoughts for kind of our tour operator community? And before I give you the last word, I want to say thank you to both of you. Also, if anyone in the audience or watching the recording or listening on the podcast is in New York City on Thursday the 26th in 2 days, Airwallx is sponsoring some bites. We're going to have some drinks and some bites in Midtown Manhattan to meet some of the Airwallx team, the Tourpreneur team, and tour operators and travel professionals from around the New York City area. And everybody is welcome. You can get more info on tourpreneur.com. Josh, final words, takeaways, thoughts, reactions. Remember, make it sexy.
Make it sexy, yes. Making payments sexy again. I mean, look, it's as simple as take the time to just reevaluate your payment stack, right? There's a lot of complex things. And I feel like when tour operators, they run in, they're like, okay, this is great. How can I get more tours? How can I get more clients? But and then in the day, what you really want to do is increase your profit in a super simple way. Instead of having to, hey, we have to go to marketing. We have to go ahead and try to go on some fan trips to learn different types of trips in different countries. You can actually save a significant amount of margin and just changing about how you go about accepting and sending payments. So my biggest recommendation is just go ahead and just really, really evaluate, okay, how much time am I taking? How much money am I spending the way that you're conducting payments? Really just as simple as that. And so anyone who else is out there, again, listen to podcasts, I'll be there, Max and myself on Thursday. Excited to meet the community and expect some fun Facebook video posts to be coming from me soon.
That's September 26, 2024, in case you found this in the Tourpreneur podcast archive 6 years later. I don't want you showing up. And how should any of our community members get a hold of you if they were interested in continuing the conversation?
Yeah, definitely. So what I'll do from here is we'll go ahead and share our contact information. Also, I'll post it within the Facebook page. And any type of questions, feel free to go ahead and reach out via email. I can even just put like WhatsApp might be easier for some people. So I'll go ahead and post our contact information within the Facebook page. And Mitch, I don't know if you want to share it through other types of various ways that you guys do there, but feel free. Just give me a call, text. I like chatting. I like meeting people.
Excellent. We will write it on walls of New York City streets. And
there you go.
Anywhere else we can. Gentlemen, this was really illuminating. I really enjoyed hearing kind of your perspective on figuring this all out. And honestly, it just sounds easier. It sounds like I just need to call up Josh and Max and we can figure it out. So exactly. I appreciate you helping us decipher some of these pain points of kind of the tour operator's life. And thank you for your time.
Of course. Awesome. Thanks, Mitch, for having us.
It was a pleasure.
More resources and recordings and everything else for those of you listening will be on tourpreneur.com, and resources including contact info and everything else. Thank you all out there for listening.
See you guys.